Well, thank you for joining me on another podcast, Grace Without Borders. This is Bishop Orville Beckford saying it's another day and God is good. Grace Without Borders can be heard on all podcast platforms, so make sure that you subscribe and share with your friends and your family. If you are blessed or inspired, email me at orbministries@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. Check out my website, obeckford.com.us.org, and keep in touch. Subscribe to my podcast and check out my YouTube channel, ORB Ministries. Today, I'm going to be talking to two ladies, Christy Wells and Brittany Dunn from Safe House Project, as they tell me about child sex trafficking. You will be surprised to know the numbers. So join us on this podcast as we get into the statistics and why it is motivating and how you can learn how to discover and notice sex trafficking may be happening next door to you. Let's go into the conversation with Brittany and Christy. So thank you for joining me on another podcast, Grace Without Borders. I'm excited today to have with me two very special people that I want to talk to today, because they're special because they have major concerns about things that are happening in our communities and are impacting our world, as a matter of fact. And some of these things may not be well known to some of my listeners. Some of you who are listening might not be aware, because if that's not the path you travel, if not that's not the document you read, if not that the podcast you listen to, or the voices you hear, you wouldn't have an idea. Or if you even heard about it, you wouldn't really get to know what the depth of trafficking. So I have two wonderful ladies joining me from Safe House Project. Safe House Project, and their major concern is about trafficking. I have Brittany Dunn, who is the COO of Safe House Project, co-founder, and I also have Christine Wells, who is the CEO and co-founder. This is not really normal for you just to have the two heads of a company talking to at the same time. So welcome, ladies, to Grace Without Borders. And of course, Grace Without Borders means that grace has no borders. Grace has no borders. And although we are not going to be talking only Christian today, but Grace Without Borders means there is no depth, no height, nothing one can do or be involved in, no circumstance one can find himself in, whether he is the victim or he is the predator, that there is not grace to restore that one, and he or she can find himself out of any dire situation if they are willing to pursue the unmerited favor of God that is called grace. All right, so welcome, Christy and Brittany. Good to have you.
Thank you for having us here today. We're excited to chat with you. It's great to be here.
All right. I'm excited as you are, maybe even more than you are. So tell me about. I'm gonna hear from you one by one. Tell me from your perspective, as I said, what triggered the or inspire or motivate you to come up with a Safe House Project?
Yeah. So the beginning of our story was really, Brittany and I had both seen this issue. She had seen it some domestically and internationally. I had seen it on a missions trip when I was 16 in Costa Rica. And it was one of those issues that both of us had seen and could never look away from. But we are both military spouses and travel the world following the husbands that we adore and their careers. And so the ability to get involved with one local organization didn't really ever present itself to us. And we're, again, so transient. However, in 2017, a friend of ours went to South Africa and was supporting some partners of ours down there who were looking to build a local safe house to protect girls that were single and double orphaned from an AIDS epidemic. And they were looking to bring in a safe house to help protect them from sex trafficking because many of them were being trafficked. But when he came back from that missions trip. He's a Christian hip hop artist. And when he came back from that missions trip, his heart was on fire and he wanted to raise money to support the building up of the safe house. So we jumped in with both feet and began supporting that opportunity and helping raise funds and figure out ways that we could get that safe house built. But as we were doing it, people kept saying, that's great. And we absolutely have to serve internationally, but what are you going to do domestically? And we didn't have an answer for that. We weren't looking to have an answer for that. But we are both kind of lifelong students. And so we became students of the anti-trafficking industry. We wanted to understand what were the problems, where were the gaps, and really, was there a place for us? And what we found was information and statistics that once we saw, we really couldn't look away. We couldn't walk away. And we changed our entire life trajectory. And we began Safe House Project because what we saw was that there were 300,000 American kids trafficked for sex in the United States every year.
Wow.
But victim identification was only at 1%. And so that needed addressing. But we also realized that once 1% was identified or rescued, so let's say 3,000 kids rescued each year or getting out of that situation, if they don't have a safe place to go and to heal, 80% of that 1% was ending up back in traffickers' hands. And so there were only 100 beds in restorative care homes, or safe houses as we call them, in America at that point in 2017. So from that perspective, we began our mission to increase victim identification above 1%, to make sure that people were truly educated to understand trafficking, and then to make sure that once survivors were pulled out of their trafficking situation, that they had the opportunity to heal from the trauma that they had endured. And so to date, we've educated hundreds of thousands of people, and we have also helped add 174 new beds to the national landscape through restorative care homes. And we continue that mission day in, day out.
So before you even go further, this alarming number that just pops up on me, let me back up a little bit. So your inspiration came from traveling and discovering the outside world where it became more real. And it is interesting because oftentimes in our circle where we live, some of us where we live, because things are not rampant in our community or in our local area, sometimes the awareness of the real world experience is not there. So being wives of soldiers, and blessings to you and your husbands that serve our country, we appreciate them and thank you for your service as well. Just to encourage them to be supporting them to serve us is a big issue, and just to know that threat and the danger of serving and to allow your spouses to do that it's a blessing in itself. So you have discovered the trafficking from going to Africa. The awareness comes to light, and then you wanted to do something there to help. But now you also realize that it is not only international, it is local, and these numbers are alarming. To have 300,000 children. You said yes. Children?
Yes.
In United States of America, 300 children are trafficked each year. And only about how much? 3,000 that get discovered or get help?
Yeah, 300,000.
That is incredible.
Yeah, it's alarming. It's really what it comes down to.
That is alarming. And I last year, in my residency, there was one of my chaplain classmates who did a presentation on trafficking, and I was blown away by just hearing those numbers and some of the situation. It was alarming to me. So to have two ladies who are upfront, up close and personal, who are involved in looking out for those and provide safe houses, I couldn't be more blessed to have you with me. So tell me more about your mission and your accomplishments. And I was listening to Christy, right?
Yes.
That was Christy. I haven't heard from Brittany yet. So let me hear a little bit from Brittany and then we come around. Again, I'm talking to two ladies from Safe House Project, and their mission is to provide a safe place for victims of human children trafficking. So we're talking to two wonderful ladies, CEO and COO.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. Yes, we have the opportunity to really impact our communities, and we are just thankful for that. So to date, as Christy mentioned, we've been able to train hundreds of thousands of people on how to spot, report, and prevent trafficking. We do that in a few ways. We have a community-based training called On Watch that is available at iamonwatch.org that really equips people with the information that they need to understand trafficking a little bit deeper, understand what signs and indicators are present in different types of trafficking situations. Most people are alarmed to realize that 40% of trafficking survivors are trafficked by a family member. And so we really, yes. So often this isn't about moving people. It's about these kids are being trafficked by the people that were put in their world to keep them safe and protect them from predatory behavior. And so a lot of times this may look like a severe case of child sexual abuse or neglect, or, it might present with a child who is missing a lot of school. And so we really try to walk people through what are the different signs and indicators present in these different types of trafficking situations, and how has it really woven its way into the fabric of our community. We go a step further with some industries to really elevate their understanding as frontline response for this. So healthcare, law enforcement, military, educators, and government workers really have the opportunity to see this on the job and know how that they can report it to the proper authorities. So we work to really elevate that education so that we can, so that ultimately we can see survivor identification increasing above 1%. And then for us, our heartbeat when we started this was the safe housing part, which is the idea that we never want to educate people on how to spot these kids if we don't have a safe place to put them. And so we want to ensure that their story does not end at escape. And so we worked to really come alongside new or expanding organizations through funding and mentorship and elevate the standard of care that these individuals are receiving in safe house programs around the United States. And so to date, we have helped add 174 new beds to the national landscape and are currently reviewing 95 applications for 2021-2022 funding, and mentorship, which would systematically increase the number of safe housing options in states across the United States. And so we're really excited about that. But then I think what's been the most impactful for me personally is by the nature of doing education in safe housing is that we've become a natural survivor placement opportunity. And so we have a lot of individuals, organizations, law enforcement, who reach out to us when they are able to identify a survivor and they say, can you help us find a safe place for this individual? Can you help with emergency services, case management, transportation, all of these really important first steps that it takes when we identify an individual. And so we come alongside and we just really meet them in that first 24 to 72 hours and execute whatever support is needed in order to get them to a somewhere safe. And so we've served 163 survivors through our emergency crisis management. And then on the backside of some of these programs, we've had the opportunity to hire adult survivors into our organization, help with economic empowerment, skilling. And so really wanting to show a full circle of approach of how we can really address trafficking to see it eradicated in the United States.
One of the questions, and thank you, Brittany. One of the questions that I have is, what's the main motivating factor in trafficking children? What do you find as one of the main motivating factors?
Yeah, I think that one of the main motivating factors, honestly, it is the money for sure. We see that, there are different reports out there and it's so hard. It's an illegal industry. So we never know definitively that this is the statistic, but a lot of those reports show that people can make up to $250,000 a year for trafficking one child. And so when we have survivors who come into care who said, my dad, my boyfriend, my whoever trafficked me for $300 per buyer when I was 10 years old, that's a lot of money. And unfortunately, when you have like COVID, for instance, we have seen a huge loss of income for certain individuals and population bands throughout the United States over the past year. And so what happens is in those economic depressions for some individuals, they turn to selling their children in order to meet the basic needs for their household. And so that's what's also really challenging is sometimes these kids come to us and they're like, I am so broken because I know my mom was just trying to put food on the table. She was just trying to ensure that we had rent this month. And so they are giving their children to the landlord to pay rent. It's not always these huge, glorious amounts of money. Sometimes it's basic needs. And so that's what just makes this so challenging and multifaceted is that the motivation can be a lot of different things depending on who the trafficker is and the relationship to the child.
So two questions. I hear you on the. I'm gonna come back to the landlord kind of thing or the desperation of a parent passing on a child. So my other question was, what do you find maybe from some of the survivors or from your own findings as the buyer's goal? What's the buyer's goal? What somebody come and paying $300 or more or X amount, thousands of dollars for a young lady. What's the buyer's goal?
The buyer's goal? I think the buyers that are coming in, they are coming in to have sex with young children. And this is what we found is that most people don't begin as predators with an attraction to children. But what we've seen is that by nature of pornography, like if you think of the science of the brain and you think about somebody who's a drug addict and they have to continue going to harder and harder drugs over the continuation of their addiction in order to get the
same stimuli.
In order to get that stimulation. And what we found is that pornography entering its way, the average age of a child seeing pornography right now is 14. Or that's backwards. 97% of children will see pornography by the age of 14. And so if you think that is the starting point of stimulus and that there are addictions that are bred out of that, and you've got somebody who is 14, now 14 years later, they are 28 years old. They have moved beyond just watching pornography. Now they are buying sex, and now those same stimulus have to get stronger and stronger for them to get the reaction that the mental and physical reaction that they did before. And so we're seeing this as a progression into harder core pornography and then manifestation of the buyers now transferring over, or the pornography viewers transferring over into buying children. And so they are going younger and younger and younger because the average age of entry into the sex trafficking arena is 12 years old. But that's the data that we have. Now, I can tell you anecdotally from our survivors, that child sexual abuse and the sale of those children actually began much younger. We are seeing abuse begin at 2, 3, 4 years old, where they are groomed, where that early childhood sexual abuse begins. And so there are, at the end of the day, it's somebody looking to buy sex from a child.
Wow. I am alarmed and I am disturbed and I am saddened that our little children have become victims, and in their innocence, I can't even begin to decipher that. I was gonna ask you. Thanks for telling me about the age group, because I was gonna ask what's the age range. I've heard little stories here and there about abuse of children and parents passing on children for survival. But as you said here, I'm hearing that from you too, that sometimes out of desperation, Parents said, do I pass on my child to my landlord for satisfaction, conveniently to him or her, for that matter, just that the rest of us can survive and so we can find a place to live. And you said that is some of the issue that you have discovered.
Yeah, I think especially during COVID, we've seen a rise in that behavior. But it can present in every community. And that's what's so hard, is that this is an issue that knows no bounds. It affects every socioeconomic class, race, religion, and demographic. And so even down to the fact that now we're finding that 35% of survivors are boys. Like, that's a huge part for people to wrap their minds around, is the impact on not just women and children, but on boys. And so when a few years ago, so 2018, Department of State, they put out an annual report called the Trafficking in Persons Report. And that report showed that the United States is in the top 3 nations in the world now for trafficking. And so what really happened during COVID is that you had all of these American buyers who have means to buy sex at varying rates trapped on domestic soil. And so there was an exponential growth in trafficking in the United States over the past year because of that. And so what we have seen is things like the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, their sexual abuse files have increased over 90% year over year. Calls to the tip line around predatory behavior is up 64%. And so just holistically, COVID has created such a vacuum of either need due to loss of income, of mental health challenges, of people, engaging more consistently in the digital space and becoming desensitized to certain interactions. All of these are challenges that are going to continue to play out over the next few years and decades as a result of this time. And so we all have to be aware that many individuals were trapped in unsafe homes over the past year, and equip ourselves with the information on how to identify those individuals as we come back together to ensure that we can connect them with the necessary resources they need to start their healing journey.
Again, I'm talking to, thank you, that's Brittany, right? I'm talking to Christy Wells and Brittany Dunn from Safe House Project, and their passion and their motivation is to reach out to help protect and find a safe house for exploited children who have been trafficked by their parents or by just sellers and buyers. And so they're here to help us to get a better understanding of the world we're living in and what are some of the signs to look for, because there could be trafficking happening right next to your apartment, especially if you live in an apartment complex. There could be trafficking happening right there, in and out, and you have not noticed because you don't know what are the signs and the symptoms to look for. All right, so one of my questions are there frequent buyers based on, on what you have discovered? There are frequent buyers, and if there is a frequent buyer, what's the outlet?
Do you mean where are they purchasing from?
The outlet is like, after if there's a frequent buyer, do they have a stockpile of young kids that they have at their disposal, or do they go through a back door one way or the other after they come in?
That really depends on the situation. I mean, trafficking manifests itself in a lot of different ways because you have organized crime where they're trafficking children through that. You can have it more in the gangs and having the children trafficked through gangs. You can have it as more individualized cases of a family member trafficking. And so it really comes down to what type of trafficking and who is the trafficker as to how the buyers are getting to them. But data does show that the most average time during the day for a buyer to engage in commercial sex is 2 p.m. in the afternoon, because they're able to do it under the umbrella of when they should be at work, or when they're somewhere that people would, they can slip out and slip back in without really being noticed by maybe their family or people who they would normally be held accountable by. And so I think that's something to note, is that this isn't just things that are happening at night. It can be happening during the day, which is why, one of the indicators we frequently reference is kids being out of school frequently or getting pulled out unexpectedly. And so, it looks a lot of different ways. The ways that they get there usually are buying online for the buyers. I would say that, they are doing that in both the covert setting through the dark web, but they also are doing it very overtly on social media platforms. And so there's a language to trafficking, just like there's a language to terrorism and every other organized crime out there. And so it is just key that we continue to elevate our understanding so that we can continue to drive towards solutions that will allow for identification to be easier to spot, and for those measures to be put in place for, crawling the web and things like that to increase the artificial intelligence for identifying the advertisements online.
So then the truth is that not all the children who are involved in the sex trafficking are gone from one point to the other. Some of them are still in their same homes, go and come just for fund for the purpose of somebody getting money and somebody getting sex.
Yes, absolutely. And there are a lot of different ways that trafficking can look. So as Brittany mentioned, 40% of child trafficking is a child trafficked by a family member. That looks like a kid who is, maybe even in school, in church activities, but behind closed doors, that child is being sold maybe out of that family's home or handed to somebody else who is then selling that child on the weekends. So it can look that way. There was one survivor who came from an upper middle class home and was raped by a boy, and pictures were taken. And they said, basically, if you don't comply with our demands, we're going to endanger your father's high profile career by sharing these pictures. And they were threatening her brother and her family. They killed her dog on the phone with her, had taken her dog. And so she was terrified, and she was terrified to speak out and to ask for help. So for 2 years, 3 to 4 nights a week, these boys would pick her up, transport her to a local motel or basement where they would sell her and then return her home. Her family never knew, and she was a teenage sex slave hiding in plain sight. And so trafficking is right under our nose. And if we continue to believe that it's an international issue, then we are missing the children in our communities and in our churches and on our soccer leagues that are being hurt. And they are desperately looking for somebody to see them, desperately looking for somebody to believe them. And so if you are an adult and you see a child who looks like they are vulnerable, becoming a friend and becoming a friendly ear and believing the crazy is the best thing that you can do, because there are some of the stories that we know of survivors that, if knowing what I know now, if they had come to me and said that, I would have said, I believe you. But knowing what my perspective was on trafficking even 5 years ago, if that same child had come to me and said something, I would have thought, oh my gosh, this is just a child looking for attention. Sure, I'm sure there's some element of this that's true, but this child just needs help. But when we have those kids in our communities and in our homes that are just looking like there's something wrong, and we all know it, we all have those senses that make the hair on the back of our neck stand up. We will give you a place where you can go and learn all the signs and indicators, but all of us just know if something is off. Being a friend to that child, hearing them, and then taking the actions to report it if something seems off is always the best path, because there might be something that seems off that might look like trafficking, and you can report it. And you know what? It's child abuse. It's not trafficking. But you're never going to be found at fault for reporting something that doesn't turn out to be trafficking. I would rather 10,000 people report something and, 9,000 of them come out to be false, 9,999 come out to be false, and that one child be saved.
I totally agree with you. So, just listening to you, again, telling this story or creating the awareness of child sex trafficking is creating this awareness that somebody can discover sign. as you said, there's a possibility that a child is being sold by a friend or a neighbor regularly, and the parent don't know.
Absolutely.
Because the child might be maybe benefiting a little bit from it. Some of them may be benefiting. Some might get something from it. Some don't get something, or some might be just fearful of their lives or their parents' lives, so they keep it undercover. But as you said, Christy, if we are aware and alert, even when a child don't want to say, psychologically, and if we are aware, we could maybe discover some actions, some attitudes, some change in behavior that maybe could warrant further investigation if the parents are aware that there are signs that we should look for.
Yeah. Well, one thing to your point about a child might be benefiting, trauma bonds are one of the primary ways that traffickers keep their victims compliant. And they really begin this relationship with them where they say, I love you, I'm going to take care of you, I'm the only person who gets you, I'm going to do all of these things. And they begin kind of weaving that web of lies around the child, saying, I am the only person in your world who gets you. And then they will a lot of times isolate the child, or they'll do something that causes the child to self-isolate. So maybe it's a boy who begins weaving a web of lies around a girl and then talks her into sneaking out, and she's raped. Well, now he's the one who knows, he's the one who has control, and she is ashamed and she's embarrassed and she blames herself. And the second that a trafficker can get that self-doubt, that shame, that guilt into a survivor, that holds them captive more than anything else.
So they're vulnerable to further exploitation.
Absolutely. Yeah. And there are so many survivors that say, I never left because I felt like it was my fault at some level. And they're afraid to reach out because they've maybe isolated themselves from family. They've shut people out, and now they feel like they don't have a pathway back. So yes, the patterns of trauma bonds is that they're oftentimes going to bathe them in love and abuse, or abuse, and then shower them with love and gifts or something like that. And it's kind of that they wake up every day and they don't know if they're going to get Jekyll or Hyde. But so there might be a monetary gain there, but the primary way that a trafficker is going to hold somebody in trafficking is not shackles. It's not chains. It's not locking them in a basement. It's holding them guilty or holding them captive by shame and guilt.
So that's a good understanding of that, because again, creating the awareness in a community, because again, if knowledge is power, and if people are not well educated, they could just not pay attention to something, because in the minds of some, I am sure in the minds of some, is that when you hear about child sex trafficking, they will think like, okay, the child is being sold and the child is gone to Timbuktu, and we don't see the child again in the community, so we don't know what happened. But now you're creating an awareness that that's not necessarily even the greater number. The greater number are kids who are still around daily, and you see them often, so you're not aware that something is happening behind the scene. But we're gonna come to what are some of the signs and indicators that we as a community, as a faith-based organization, because as you said, sometimes you would think that the church is a very safe place and only angels and righteous saints go to church. But sometimes it could create this sense of security, if I could say, that well, thank God it's not in my area, and unknown to you, it could be really prominent in your area, unnoticed by you.
Completely. I mean, you're 100% accurate. And I mean, the number of survivors that we've walked alongside who have been walked into a church after their trafficking situation and ran into a buyer in the congregation is Lord. Astronomical. The number of them who come and say, I was abused and trafficked by somebody who is in, on a staff of a church is up there, because we're not immune to it just because we're members of the church. We are all human, and we're all, part of we've all fallen short. And so by nature of that, the church is filled with broken people. But the beauty of that is what I love about, even the name of your podcast is that grace can touch every single one of them. And so one of the most beautiful stories that happened recently with one of our survivors is she goes, I felt like that day when I walked into the church and saw that fire, something switched in me, because I realized that if Jesus had gone to the cross for me, then he went to the cross for that man too. And maybe he is in a different place today than he was that day that he bought me. And so she was able to extend forgiveness to the person in that room who had hurt her as a 9-year-old child. And that is the testimony of what healing brings, of what restorative care can bring, of what God can do in and through his people stepping into hard situations, to seeing lives not just rescued or people escaping a trafficking situation, but see true transformation. And so that is the beauty of what we get to be part of every single day, is watching God work miracles in the lives of not just survivors, but of buyers, of traffickers, and of the community, to choose to not to say, oh, that problem's too big, or that problem's too hard, or that's been around for thousands of years. Who do I think that I am to step into this and be part of the solution?
That just warms my heart, what you just said there, Brittany, about a victim walked into a church and saw a previous buyer who she was a victim to, and she saw that person in the church, and she concluded that grace was not only for the victim, but it could have been applied to the predator as well.
Yep.
That's an incredible story. And it comes back to no wonder my podcast name is Grace Without Borders. And sometimes if we could only find ourselves in the grace of God and the mercy and to make good of it, then all our lives, even the greed of this self-gratifying lust and fantasy and crave could be stemmed if we could find ourselves under the grace of God. Again, I'm talking to Christy Wells and Brittany Dunn from Safe House Project, and their passion is to look out for children who are victim of sex trafficking. And so I am amazed. I am amazed at the numbers, and I am interested in hearing a little bit more, because if you're listening to this podcast, then this awareness is to help you to change your mentality, to change your thinking, to change how you understand what sex trafficking of children might mean. Again, if you learn one thing from this, learn this, that sex trafficking or the selling of children does not mean the children are sold to some other community across town or out of the country. It means they are being used and abused, and they could be used and abused over and over and over, and they are still living in your neighborhood, at least pushing the door right to your apartment, and they're still there and being exploited. So just to help you to create that awareness.
Yes. So thank you so much. And really, to educate yourselves, go to iamonwatch.org. Take the free 1-hour training.
Tell us again. Tell us slowly.
Yep. I am on watch.
I am on watch.
.org.
Okay.
Free. It's 1 hour of your day. You can break it up. It's 10 modules. You can break it up into 10 sittings if you really need to. They're 5 minutes apiece. Listen to one each morning for 10 days while you're getting ready in the morning. But that will just equip you with the information that you need to feel empowered to spot, report, and most importantly, is eventually prevent child trafficking in our communities.
Did you hear what Brittany just said? If you want to get even more aware of what to look for, there's a website that is called iamonwatch.org. iamonwatch.org, where you can go and learn of what to look for. And I'm sure there'll be a lot more information that we can tell you here to help you to create an awareness, because your niece, your nephew, your sister, your brother, your friend, your friend's friend could be on sale or could be involved in being trafficked every day or every now and then or ever so often. And what happened, and I know you may be time for you to go, but tell me what you discover psychologically, mentally, emotionally, socially that impact some of these children's lives. How the resource you provide to help them to pull through that, to rediscover themselves.
Right. So the trauma that they come in with is extensive. There is, to your point, there is psychological damage. They have been told that they are nothing more than a commodity. Mm-hmm. If you think of a child, I'll give you an example. We had a little girl come into care who was 13 when she came into the safe house. She had been sold for 3 years by her grandmother. Her grandmother had sold her mother, had trafficked her mom. And when she was 10 years old, her mom had become too drug addicted and STD ridden to be of use. And so the grandmother turned to the 10-year-old as the family source of income. She was sold 40 times a day. She was pulled out of school in order to facilitate that. That little girl wasn't taken to the dentist. Nobody cared what she ate for breakfast. Nobody wanted to make sure that she was going to the doctor for her annual checkups. None of those things were happening. And she, as a result of that, was just physically and emotionally broken. She was suicidal. She didn't want to live. And I think that we, oftentimes when we see these things happening in the news, we see that 43 children were rescued out of Ohio. Then we think, great, they were rescued. That's fantastic. They can go back to their safe, loving homes, mm-hmm. and they're going to just heal. And that's not what happens. Again, when 40% of those child victims are trafficked by a family member, they can't return home because home is where they were pulled out of. Mm-hmm. And so a safe house, what we help fund and build, is not just a house. It's not just a shelter. Mm-hmm. It is a place where these kids come for 12 to 18 months that they are getting loved on. There are usually house guardians that are over the home, creating a safe, loving, home-like environment. And these girls or boys have education on site. They make sure that they are just surrounded with the best educational tools. And these kids want to be in school. Oftentimes, school is the only safe place that they ever knew. And so they'll get in and they'll jump 3 grade levels in a year because they're so focused and they're so excited to have an opportunity. So education, life skills training. I mean, literally, there was one little girl who came into a safe house that the poor thing didn't even know how to boil water. Mm. So, we can't just toss these kids back out into the world and expect that they're going to thrive when basic life skills weren't ever taught to them. How to brush their teeth. Oftentimes toothbrushes are used as training tools to keep them to learn how to not gag. Mm-hmm. And so there are things like that teaching a child how to brush their teeth is important, basic life skills. But therapy is also something that is deployed in these safe houses and multiple modalities of therapy. We can't just expect an 8-year-old to sit down in a therapist chair and spill her life story and then learn how to have the emotional processing to work her way through it. No, some of them come in and they're nonverbal. They don't know how to speak. There was one little girl who came in with a hoodie over her eyes that was cinched shut. And for the first 6 months, nobody saw anything but her eyeballs. And then over time, she actually went into art therapy. And over time, that hoodie started to open up, and then it started to come down. And now she's healed, but she has gone through art therapy and individual therapy and yoga therapy. Equine therapy and pet therapy are amazing things to get these girls opening up to understand that they can be on a horse and have control over something that powerful. That's amazing to see the confidence that it gives them. Mm-hmm. And so they come in with a lot of trauma. And trauma and healing from trauma is not linear. Some of them present with dissociative identity disorder, multiple personalities. Their mind has literally fractured in order to hold the memories of some of the trauma that they are enduring because what they're enduring is too much for any one person to bear. We see a lot of dissociative identity disorder, especially in those who've gone through satanic ritual abuse. And so, because sometimes a trafficker will sell a child into satanic ritual abuse, who they are then the ones abusing her. And so we see a lot of this, but the power of the safe houses and the reason we are willing to fight to raise every dollar that we can to get every bed open that we can is that healing truly can come, and it does. And there are people who are boots on the ground in the trenches every day, that these are the people that God called into this space to love on these girls, to serve them. And there are people out there ready, willing, and able to launch safe houses to serve these kids. Our job is just to make sure that we can help them do it through the funding. So the other thing that we'll point people to, if you're hearing this and you want to be part of it, I know I remember when people used to ask me for a donation, and I'd be like, I don't know, is it going to make a difference? Or yes, it does. Every dollar makes a difference. Our favorite donations that come in are the $5 donations, because it's people who said, I don't have much, but I'm going to do what I can. And so safehouseproject.org is our website. It's the place to go to donate if you feel so inclined. And we have about 95% of our dollars that come in truly go to programmatic work. We aren't here for a paycheck by any means. We're here to make sure that the survivors get the healing that they deserve.
I am touched by your passion and the awareness. Of course, sometimes life shapes itself for us. And sometimes it's not what we project that we would do in our future, it's not our aspirations, our dreams, it's not what we go to school and college for. But sometimes we run into things. And then it captivates our minds and grab our attention and speaks to our emotions and stimulate us or inspire us to try to make a difference. And I could see that happening here. And I must say, congratulations on launching this project and succeeding with the project. And I could only, and I go back to you saying, small donations matter. I remember some of these politicians boast that they accumulate millions of dollars, and most of our donors are $27. I heard that over the last election season, and many of them were $5. But if 100,000 people give $5, then that is $500,000. That's $500,000 right there. So it could really sum up to be a nice little fun. And so if you want to know more, you're going to go I am on watch. If you want to know about signs to look for, you're going to iamonwatch.org. If you want to make a contribution to Safe House Project, then you go to safehouseproject.org. And you can find a lot more information there. I am talking to the CEO and the COO of Safe House Project. And this is Grace Without Borders. Even if you're a victim or you have been a predator, you too can find grace and you too can turn your life around, because God can change anything for anybody. Is there anything else you want to tell me? I hope this is not the last time that we're going to have a conversation. I hope that another time we'll come back and say, tell me, ladies, how have things been going? You are projecting another 175 beds, you say, and you're looking for other safe houses, people who are inspired to provide safe houses too. So maybe this is just the beginning, and who knows where it will go another year or so from now. And my personal wishes to you is that your dreams become even more your reality, and that God will provide you the resources that you need to keep on touching lives.
Yes and amen.
Yes and yes and amen. Yes and amen. Thank you for joining me, Christy and Brittany. It's my pleasure to get to meet you, and I hope that we will have more conversation in the future.
Yes, thank you so much.
You have my email, you have my information. You can tell me, you can just drop me a line, tell me how things are going.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for having us on today. And thank you to your listeners for listening to a hard topic.
I
the
hope
more we're willing to look at it, the more that we're going to be able to eradicate it.
I hope with God's help and your continuous effort that there'll be a major reduction in the number of of children victim and exploitation of the and the robbing of the youth of our
Yes.
children. God
Yeah.
bless you.
Yes, you as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Be safe and be good. Well, thank you for joining me on another podcast. I hope that you have been inspired by what you have heard in that conversation, and hope that you'll be a source of help to protect our children. So learn how you can help by educating yourself, going to iamonwatch.org so you can learn more, and you can also contribute at safehouseproject.org and be a help in saving our children. This is Grace Without Borders. This is Bishop Orville Beckford Sr. And again, if you are blessed and inspired by my podcast, remember to subscribe and share with your friends and your family. Check my YouTube channel, ORB Ministries, and check out my website, obeckford.com.net.us. Email me at orbministries@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. Remember to subscribe to my YouTube channel as well, so you can keep in touch. You never know who is going to be in the next conversation. So make sure that you are connected to Grace Without Borders. Until next time, stay blessed, stay encouraged, stay helpful. God bless you. This is Grace Without Borders. And that's what it means. Grace has no borders. Until next time, see you.